Why would I lie? Dante turned back to her, and his eyes were blazing with an intensity that made her breath catch. You tried to kill me. You nearly succeeded. I have you completely at my mercy right now. If I was the monster you think I am, you'd already be dead. Or worse. He moved closer, crouching down so he was at eye level with her, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark irises, the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the absolute certainty in his expression. I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to find evidence of what really happened that night. And then, his voice dropped to something almost gentle, almost unbearably sad. Then I'm going to give you the vengeance you deserve. Just aimed at the right target. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse suite like bullets against glass, each droplet a small explosion in the silence of the night. Aria Santos moved through the shadows of Dante Moretti's hotel room with the practiced grace of a predator, her body a weapon honed by 4 years of relentless training and an all-consuming hunger for vengeance. The plush carpet beneath her boots absorbed every footfall, making her approach as silent as death itself. Her heart beat steady and cold in her chest, a metronome counting down to the moment she would finally claim what she'd sacrificed everything to achieve. The suite was a monument to obscene wealth, all marble surfaces and imported furniture that probably cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Crystal decanters gleamed on a mahogany bar, reflecting the city lights that pierced through the storm outside. Aria's fingers tightened around the custom blade strapped to her thigh, its weight as familiar as her own heartbeat. She had spent countless nights imagining this moment, rehearsing every possible scenario, anticipating every contingency. Her intelligence had been perfect. Dante Moretti was supposed to be alone, his security detail dismissed for a private evening, his guard finally lowered after weeks of meticulous surveillance. She had breached 4 layers of security to reach this room. 4 layers that were supposed to be impenetrable. The keycard hack, the camera loop, the biometric bypass, the laser grid in the hallway, each obstacle had fallen before her expertise like dominoes. Aria allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction as she moved toward the bedroom, where soft light spilled from beneath the door. This was it. The man who had destroyed her entire world, who had stolen her family and left her with nothing but screams that echoed in her nightmares, would finally face justice at the edge of her blade. But as her hand reached for the bedroom door handle, the cold press of a gun barrel against the base of her skull stopped her breath. Bold move, breaking into my room, a voice said behind her, smooth as expensive whiskey and just as intoxicating. But incredibly stupid. Aria's muscles coiled like a spring. In one fluid motion she spun, her elbow arcing toward where she estimated his throat would be. But Dante Moretti was faster than she'd anticipated. He deflected her strike with his forearm, and suddenly they were locked in a brutal dance of violence, each movement precise and lethal. His gun clattered away across the marble floor. She drove her knee toward his ribs, but he twisted, absorbing the blow against his hip while his hand shot out to grip her wrist. You're well trained, he observed, his voice maddeningly calm as he blocked a strike that should have shattered his collarbone. Ex-military? Private contractor? Aria didn't waste breath on words. She reversed her grip on her blade, slashing upward in an arc designed to open his throat. He jerked back but not quite fast enough. The tip of her knife drew a thin red line across his jaw. For a split second, she saw surprise flash in his dark eyes, those eyes that had haunted her every waking moment for 4 years. Eyes she'd seen in countless photographs, surveillance footage, intelligence reports. Eyes that belonged to the monster who'd orchestrated the massacre of everyone she loved. You cut me, he said almost admiringly, touching his jaw and examining the blood on his fingers. No one's managed that in years. His distraction was her opening. Aria launched herself at him with everything she had, driving him backward into the living area. They crashed into a side table, sending an expensive vase shattering across the floor. She straddled him, blade raised for the killing blow, finally within reach of her revenge. But Dante's hand shot up, catching her wrist with crushing strength. His other hand locked around her throat, not squeezing, just holding her in place with the promise of violence. They were frozen like that, her blade trembling inches from his heart, his fingers spanning her windpipe, both of them breathing hard. Who sent you? He demanded, his eyes boring into hers. She tried to break his grip, but he was impossibly strong. With a swift, brutal movement, he rolled them both, pinning her beneath him on the carpet. Her wrists were captured above her head in one of his large hands, her body trapped under the solid weight of him. She bucked and twisted, but he had her completely immobilized. His face was inches from hers, close enough that she could see the golden flecks in his dark eyes, smell the expensive cologne mixed with the copper scent of the blood she'd drawn. "Let me go," she hissed through clenched teeth, her voice vibrating with barely contained fury. "Not until you tell me who wants me dead badly enough to send someone with your skills." His gaze traveled over her face with unsettling intensity, as if he were memorizing every feature. "You're not some amateur. You got through my security like it was nothing. That takes resources, training, intelligence. So who's paying you?" "No one," she spat. "This is personal." Something shifted in his expression, curiosity replacing cold calculation. "Personal? I've never seen you before in my life." "Exactly," Aria said, her voice breaking slightly despite her best efforts to remain composed. "You don't even remember them, do you? All the people you've killed, all the families you've destroyed. We're just numbers to you. Collateral damage in your empire of blood." Before Dante could respond, the suite door burst open. 3 men in expensive suits flooded in, weapons drawn, their faces set in hard lines of professional violence. They took in the scene, their boss pinning a woman to the floor, blood on his jaw, shattered furniture scattered across the room. "Boss, are you?" the first man began. "Stand down," Dante ordered, not taking his eyes off Aria. "Lower your weapons." "But sir." "I said stand down, Marco." His voice carried the absolute authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. The men hesitated, then slowly lowered their guns, though their bodies remained tense and ready. Dante finally released Aria's wrists and stood, offering her a hand up that she ignored, scrambling to her feet on her own. "Restrain her," he told his men. "But gently. Anyone who bruises her answers to me." 2 of the men moved forward cautiously as if approaching a wild animal. Aria considered fighting, but the odds had shifted impossibly against her. She allowed them to bind her wrists with plastic flex cuffs, her mind already racing through escape scenarios, calculating possibilities, refusing to accept that 4 years of preparation had led to this moment of failure. Dante straightened his shirt, his eyes never leaving her face. "Take her to the car. She's coming home with me." "Sir, we should interrogate her here, find out who sent her, then dispose of." "Did I stutter, Marco?" Dante's voice went cold enough to frost the air. "She comes with me. Alive. Unharmed. Those are your orders." The man named Marco exchanged glances with his colleagues, clearly confused, but nodded. "Yes, sir." As they led her toward the door, Aria twisted to look back at Dante Moretti. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Part fascination, part calculation, part something else entirely that made her skin prickle with awareness. "You should have killed me when you had the chance," she told him, her voice steady despite the chaos of emotions rioting through her chest. The corner of his mouth quirked up in something that might have been a smile. "Probably. But then I'd never know your story. And something tells me it's going to be a fascinating one." Hours later, Dante stood in the private viewing room of an exclusive underground auction, surrounded by the elite predators of the criminal underworld. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the subtle scent of old money and older violence. Priceless artifacts rotated on a central display platform. Stolen paintings, rare antiquities, blood diamonds that had financed wars. This was where power met wealth in the shadows, where objects of beauty were bought and sold by men who dealt in death. But Dante couldn't concentrate on any of it. His mind kept returning to the assassin now secured in his private jet, parked on a distant runway. The way she'd moved, lethal and graceful. The fury in her eyes when she'd called it personal. The fact that she'd gotten through 4 layers of security that had kept him alive through a dozen assassination attempts. "Dante, you're missing the Caravaggio," a voice beside him observed. Lorenzo, his oldest friend and consigliere, studied him with knowing eyes. "You've been staring at nothing for 10 minutes. What's going on? Do you remember anything about a family hit 4 years ago?" Dante asked quietly, his gaze fixed on the middle distance. "Something that got blamed on us?" Lorenzo frowned, mentally sorting through years of territorial disputes, power plays and strategic eliminations. 4 years? That was around the time we were expanding into the Eastern Territories. There were a lot of rumors flying around. "Why?" "The woman who tried to kill me tonight. She said it was personal. Said I don't remember the people I've killed." Dante's jaw tightened. "But I remember every name, Lorenzo. Every single one. The guilty, the necessary. I don't kill families. I don't kill innocents. That's always been my line." "You think someone set you up? Framed us for a hit to turn her into a weapon?" "I think someone trained her specifically to come after me. You don't develop those skills overnight." She's been preparing for years. Dante's voice was thoughtful, analytical, already turning the problem over from every angle. Which means someone invested considerable time and resources into creating an assassin pointed directly at me. Could be any of your enemies. Marco Rossetti has been trying to undermine your territory for years. The Valentino family still hasn't forgotten you took over their shipping routes. Or, Lot 47, the auctioneer's amplified voice cut through the room. A genuine Bernini marble sculpture, authenticated by 3 independent. Dante tuned out the details. He'd already examined the piece during the preview. It was exquisite, a small sculpture of a fallen angel that would look perfect in his private collection. He signaled his bid with a slight nod, watching the price climb steadily as other collectors entered the competition. Money was meaningless at this level. What mattered was the acquisition, the possession of beauty and rarity that others could only dream of touching. The bidding war continued for several minutes, but Dante's resources were effectively infinite. When the gavel finally fell, the sculpture was his for a sum that would have fed a small country for a year. But as he stood to arrange payment and shipping, something else caught his eye. The next lot was just being wheeled out, a small velvet display case containing a ring. Not just any ring. A rare black diamond, enormous and flawless, set in platinum with smaller stones arranged around it like stars orbiting a dark sun. The kind of ring that existed in maybe 3 or 4 examples in the entire world. Dante stopped moving. The ring was extraordinary, the kind of piece that belonged on the hand of someone equally extraordinary. Someone fierce and deadly and beautiful. Someone like Lot 48, the auctioneer began. A natural fancy black diamond, 11 carats, internally flawless. Dante raised his hand before the auctioneer could even finish the description. His bid was so aggressive, so far beyond the starting price, that the room fell into stunned silence. A few other bidders tried to compete, but Dante crushed them with numbers that made even hardened criminals blink in disbelief. Lorenzo stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. Dante, what the hell are you doing? You already bought the sculpture. Why do you need? I don't need it, Dante said quietly, watching the ring catch and refract the light into tiny rainbows across the velvet. But I'm going to give it to her anyway. To the woman who tried to kill you? The assassin you have tied up in your jet? Have you completely lost your mind? Dante turned to his friend, and his expression was utterly serious. She got through my security, Lorenzo. She nearly killed me. And when I looked in her eyes, all I saw was pain and purpose. Someone did something terrible to her and pointed her at me like a loaded gun. He paused, his voice dropping even lower. I'm going to find out what happened. And then I'm going to fix it. You can't fix everyone, Dante. Some people are just broken. Maybe, Dante acknowledged. But she's not broken. She's been sharpened into a blade. There's a difference. The gavel fell. The ring was his. The private jet sliced through the night sky 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, its interior a study in luxury that felt obscene given the circumstances. Aria was secured to one of the leather seats, her wrists bound to the armrests with reinforced restraints that wouldn't budge no matter how she tested them. She tried everything, dislocating her thumbs to slip free, looking for sharp edges to cut the material, even attempting to break the seat itself. Nothing worked. Whoever designed Dante Moretti's security protocols had anticipated every escape attempt she could imagine. The cabin was eerily quiet except for the steady hum of the engines. 2 guards sat near the cockpit door, far enough away to give the illusion of privacy but close enough to respond if she somehow freed herself. Through the window beside her, she could see nothing but darkness and the occasional wink of distant stars. She was being taken somewhere. Somewhere she couldn't escape from at 30,000 feet. Somewhere she would either get answers or die trying to get them. The door to the forward cabin opened and Dante Moretti emerged. He'd changed from his sweat-stained shirt into fresh clothes, dark slacks and a black jacket that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. The cut on his jaw had been cleaned and bandaged, a small testament to how close she'd come to killing him. He moved with the confidence of a man completely in control of his environment, carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of what was probably obscenely expensive whiskey. He settled into the seat across from her, maintaining a careful distance, and poured 2 measures of amber liquid. He slid 1 glass toward her, despite her bound hands making it impossible to reach. Not thirsty, she said flatly, her voice rough from hours of silence and suppressed emotion. Suit yourself. He took a slow sip from his own glass, watching her over the rim with those dark, assessing eyes. We have about 6 hours until we land. You can spend them in silence or we can talk. Your choice. Where are you taking me? Home, he said simply. My estate. Where I can properly investigate your claims. Aria laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. Investigate? Is that what you call torture now? How civilized. Something flickered across his face, offense maybe or genuine hurt. I don't torture people for information. That's crude and ineffective. Pain makes people say whatever they think you want to hear, not the truth. Then what do you want from me? Dante leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, the glass dangling from his fingers. I want to know who sent you. I want to know what happened to make you willing to throw your life away on a suicide mission. Because that's what it was, Bella Assassina. Even if you'd killed me, you wouldn't have made it out of that hotel alive. I know, Aria said quietly. I didn't plan to. The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Dante's expression darkened. Who hurt you? What did they take from you that made dying seem preferable to living? You, she snarled, sudden rage flooding through her veins like poison. You took everything. 4 years ago you sent men to my family's home. They killed my father, my mother, my little brother. Her voice broke and she hated herself for the weakness, but the memories were too vivid, too raw despite the years. They did things. Terrible things. And then they burned the house down with me inside. They left me for dead. Dante's face had gone completely still, all the casual charm draining away to reveal something harder underneath. 4 years ago. How old was your brother? 12, Aria whispered. He was 12 years old and he was going to be a doctor. He was so smart, so kind. He didn't hurt anyone. None of them did. We weren't involved in your world. We were just a family and you destroyed us. I didn't, Dante started, then stopped himself. He stood abruptly, pacing the narrow aisle of the jet like a caged predator. I don't kill children. I don't kill families. That's not how I operate. Someone fed you false intelligence. Don't you dare, Aria hissed, straining against her restraints. Don't you dare try to rewrite history. The evidence was everywhere. Your men bragged about it. Said Dante Moretti wanted to send a message, that no one crosses the Moretti family. I saw the security footage before the fire destroyed everything. I saw their faces. I spent 2 years tracking them down one by one, confirming they worked for you. Dante whirled to face her, and for the first time she saw genuine emotion in his eyes, not anger but something that looked horrifyingly like horror. What were their names? The men who did this. She rattled off 4 names, each one carved into her memory like scars. She'd killed 3 of them already, slow and painful deaths that had done nothing to fill the void in her chest. The 4th had disappeared before she could reach him, protected by layers of security that eventually led her back to Dante himself, the architect of her misery. With each name, Dante's expression grew darker. Marco's crew, he muttered, more to himself than to her. Marco fucking Rossetti's men. They worked for you, Aria insisted, but her voice wavered slightly. There was something in his reaction, something that didn't fit the profile she'd built of him in her mind. They worked for my rival, Dante corrected sharply. Marco Rossetti has been trying to destroy me for over a decade. 4 years ago we were in the middle of a territorial war. If someone wanted to turn a skilled operative into a weapon aimed at my heart, staging a massacre and blaming it on me would be... He stopped, his jaw working with barely suppressed rage. It would be exactly what Marco would do. You're lying, Aria said, but the conviction in her voice was crumbling. You have to be lying. Why would I lie? Dante turned back to her, and his eyes were blazing with an intensity that made her breath catch. You tried to kill me. You nearly succeeded. I have you completely at my mercy right now. If I was the monster you think I am, you'd already be dead. Or worse. He moved closer, crouching down so he was at eye level with her, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark irises, the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the absolute certainty in his expression. I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to find evidence of what really happened that night. And then, his voice dropped to something almost gentle, almost unbearably sad. Then I'm going to give you the vengeance you deserve. Just aimed at the right target. Aria stared at him, her mind reeling. 4 years of certainty, 4 years of focused hatred, suddenly thrown into chaos by the sincerity in his voice. If you're lying to me, then you can kill me later, Dante said simply. I'll even hand you the knife. I trust you to do the right thing. He stood and moved back to his seat, picking up his whiskey and draining it in one swallow. The silence stretched between them, no longer hostile but heavy with the weight of terrible possibilities. Outside the window, dawn was beginning to break over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Aria watched the sunrise, her mind spiraling through everything she thought she knew, everything she'd built her purpose around for 4 long years. If Dante was telling the truth, if she'd been manipulated, aimed like a weapon at the wrong target, then she'd wasted years of her life preparing to kill an innocent man. Well, perhaps not innocent. Dante Moretti was still a mafia boss, still a criminal, still someone with blood on his hands. But maybe not her family's blood. Maybe not the monster who'd stolen everything from her. Aria's heart stuttered in her chest, an unwelcome warmth spreading through her despite every wall she'd built. You don't know anything about me. I know you spent 4 years becoming a weapon after falling off the radar. I know you were willing to die to achieve your goal. I know you got through security systems that have stopped professional hit squads. Dante's eyes met hers, and there was something almost vulnerable in his gaze. I know you're extraordinary. And I know that if someone pointed you at me, it was because they knew you'd be the one person who might actually succeed. This is insane, Aria whispered as much to herself as to him. Everything about this is insane. You investigated me already? Welcome to my world, Bella Assassina, Dante said, and this time his smile was genuine, transforming his face from merely handsome to something that made her chest ache. It only gets more complicated from here. The jet began its descent, and through the window, Aria could see land approaching, rolling green hills, a sprawling estate that looked more like a castle than a home, surrounded by walls and security that made the hotel look like amateur hour. This was Dante Moretti's fortress. His kingdom. The place where she would either find the truth that would shatter her world, or confirmation that would let her finish what she'd started. Either way, nothing would ever be the same again. As the wheels touched down on the private runway, Dante stood and moved to release her restraints. His fingers worked the locks with practiced ease, and suddenly her hands were free. She could attack him now. Could try to finish what she'd started in that hotel room. But she didn't move. She just watched him, this man who should be her enemy, this criminal who'd somehow managed to plant seeds of doubt in the absolute certainty that had sustained her for 4 years. Come on, he said, offering her his hand. Let's go find the truth together. And despite every instinct screaming at her to refuse, despite 4 years of training herself to hate everything about him, Aria took his hand and let him lead her into his fortress, into the heart of his empire, into a truth that would change everything she thought she knew about love and vengeance and the very thin line between them. The room Dante assigned to Aria was less a prison cell and more a luxury suite that happened to have reinforced locks on the outside of the door. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens that stretched for acres, though Aria noted immediately that the glass was bulletproof and the window frames were sealed shut. The bed was enormous, draped in silk sheets that probably cost more than everything she'd owned in her previous life. A bathroom connected to one side, all marble and gold fixtures, and a walk-in closet on the other already stocked with clothes in exactly her size. Someone had done their homework. Aria ignored all of it. She paced the perimeter of the room like a caged animal, her mind racing through escape routes, attack scenarios, worst-case contingencies. The door was solid steel behind its decorative veneer. The windows were impenetrable without tools she didn't have. There were almost certainly cameras hidden in the room, though she couldn't spot them. Whoever designed this space was professional. She was trapped, at least temporarily, in a gilded cage. Hours passed. No one came. Her adrenaline slowly drained away, leaving behind exhaustion that sat like a weight on her shoulders. She hadn't slept in over 48 hours, hadn't eaten in nearly as long. Her body was starting to rebel against the demands she'd placed on it. She'd almost convinced herself to try the bed, just for a moment, just to regain some strength, when she heard the lock disengage. Instantly she was on her feet, her back to the far wall, every muscle coiled and ready despite her fatigue. Dante entered carrying a tray of food. He'd changed again, now wearing dark jeans and a simple black t-shirt that somehow made him look more dangerous than the expensive suits. The cut on his jaw had been reduced to a thin red line. He looked tired too, she realized. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usual careful control seemed frayed around the edges. I brought dinner, he said, setting the tray on the desk. You must be starving. I don't want your food, Aria said automatically, though her stomach growled in protest at the smell of fresh bread and roasted meat. Suit yourself. But I can promise it's not poisoned. What would be the point? If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. He pulled out the desk chair and sat, completely at ease despite being alone in a locked room with a trained assassin. I've spent the last 6 hours making calls, pulling up old files, analyzing security footage from 4 years ago. I have some information you're going to want to hear. I don't want to hear your lies. Aria. Her name in his mouth sounded like a prayer, rough and sincere. Please. Just listen. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the tiny seed of doubt he'd planted on the plane. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, like she mattered, like she was more than just a problem to be solved. Whatever the reason, Aria found herself moving to the bed and sitting on the edge, arms crossed defensively over her chest. Talk, she said. Dante pulled out his phone and began displaying security footage. 4 years ago, May 15th. My rival, Marco Rossetti, was escalating his attempts to take over my territories. He needed me distracted, destabilized. So he orchestrated something that would do both: a massacre brutal enough to create an enemy, and a frame job clean enough to make it stick. He showed her footage from various cameras, street surveillance, traffic cams, private security feeds his people had hacked. She watched men she'd spent 2 years hunting down, men she'd confirmed worked for Dante, meeting with Marco Rossetti himself. Watched money change hands. Watched Marco giving explicit orders. Make it look like Moretti's work. Be thorough. Leave one alive to tell the story. Aria's hands began to shake. No. No, this can't be. You could have faked this. Deep fakes, edited footage, it's all possible. Look at the metadata, Dante said quietly. These files have been sitting in my archives for 4 years. Time-stamped, verified, untouched. I didn't even know they existed until tonight. My tech people had to dig through thousands of hours of surveillance to find them. He showed her more. Financial records proving the men had been on Rossetti's payroll. Communications intercepted between them. A recording of one of them drunk, bragging about the job, burned the whole place down. Boss wanted them to think it was Moretti. Girl probably didn't make it. With each piece of evidence, Aria felt the foundation of her entire world crumbling. 4 years. 4 years of training, planning, preparing to kill the wrong man. 4 years of letting hatred consume her, of becoming a weapon aimed at an innocent target. Well, not innocent, but not guilty of her family's murder. Why? She whispered, her voice breaking. Why didn't you find this sooner? Why didn't you know? Because Rossetti covered his tracks well. And because, Dante's jaw tightened. Because 4 years ago I was dealing with 3 different territorial disputes and an assassination attempt on my own life. I had bigger concerns than tracking down every rumor about hits I supposedly ordered. I should have investigated more thoroughly. I should have. He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I'm sorry, Aria. I'm so fucking sorry. The apology shattered something inside her. She doubled over, a sob tearing from her throat that she couldn't suppress. 4 years of rigid control cracked like ice, and suddenly she was drowning in grief so profound it felt like it might crush her. Her family. Her beautiful, innocent family, murdered for nothing more than political strategy. Used as pawns in a game they didn't even know existed. And she'd become exactly what the killer wanted. A weapon. A tool of his vengeance aimed at his enemy. She didn't hear Dante move, but suddenly he was kneeling on the floor in front of her, his hands hovering near her knees but not quite touching, respecting her space even as she fell apart. I'll kill him, Dante said, his voice vibrating with barely controlled fury. I'll find Marco Rossetti and I'll destroy everything he's ever cared about. His empire, his family, his legacy. And then I'll end him. Slowly. Why? Aria gasped through her tears, looking up at him with eyes that felt like they were burning. Why do you care? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Dante's hand finally moved, gently brushing away the tears on her cheek with his thumb. The touch was electric, sending shivers through her entire body. Because someone hurt you. Someone took your family and twisted you into a weapon. And because... He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. Because when I look at you, I see someone who survived the unsurvivable. Someone who turned pain into purpose. You're extraordinary, Aria. And what was done to you is unforgivable. I tried to kill you, she reminded him weakly. I know. I'm still impressed by how close you got. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Besides, now you know the truth. Are you still planning to kill me? Aria stared at him, this complicated man who should be her enemy but instead was offering her vengeance, offering her justice, offering her... What? She didn't know. Couldn't process it through the chaos of emotions rioting through her chest. I don't know what I'm planning anymore, she admitted, her voice small. Everything I thought I knew is a lie. 4 years of my life wasted. Not wasted, Dante interrupted firmly. You became exactly what you needed to be to survive. To be strong enough to face what you thought was your demon. That's not wasted. That's... He seemed to search for the right word. That's extraordinary resilience. He stood and moved to the bed beside her, close but not crowding, his body angled toward her in unconscious protection. Let me be your vengeance, Aria. I'll be the arm that strikes for you. Marco Rossetti has been a thorn in my side for too long anyway. Now I have a reason beyond business to end him. I want to be there, Aria said, surprising herself with the vehemence in her voice. When you find him. I want to be the one who. Done? Dante agreed immediately. But we do it right. Carefully. Marco is paranoid and well protected. He's avoided 3 assassination attempts in the last 2 years alone. If we're going to get to him, we need intelligence, planning, patience. I'm good at patience, Aria said. I spent 4 years waiting for my shot at you. And now you'll spend however long it takes waiting for your real target. Dante's hand found hers on the bed, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that felt intimate and strange and right. But this time you're not alone. You have resources. You have my organization. And you have me. Aria looked down at their joined hands, his large and scarred, hers smaller but equally marked by violence. Why are you doing this? Really? Dante was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. My father once told me that power without purpose is just cruelty. I built an empire, Aria, but I've always tried to build it with some sense of honor. I don't hurt innocents. I don't murder children. I don't wage war on families who have nothing to do with my world. His voice roughened. What was done to your family violates everything I believe in. Marco Rossetti made you think I was the monster, but really he was showing you his own reflection. And for that alone he deserves to die. And? Aria pressed, sensing there was more he wasn't saying. He turned to look at her fully, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. And because from the moment you came through my window ready to kill me, something in my chest recognized something in yours. Like calls to like, Aria. We're both survivors. We've both done terrible things for what we thought were good reasons. We've both built ourselves into weapons. His free hand came up to cup her jaw, his touch achingly gentle. The difference is I chose this life. You had it forced on you. And I want. He stopped, seeming to struggle with the admission. I want to give you back what was stolen. Your choice. Your purpose beyond pain. He didn't finish because Aria closed the distance between them, her mouth finding his in a kiss that was desperate and angry and full of 4 years of pent-up emotion that suddenly had nowhere else to go. Dante made a sound low in his throat, surprise or pleasure or both, and then his arms were around her, pulling her closer, his hands sliding into her hair as he deepened the kiss with a hunger that matched her own. It was nothing like Aria had imagined a first kiss would be. There was no gentleness, no tentative exploration. This was raw need colliding with desperate comfort, 2 broken people reaching for something solid in a world that had just shifted beneath their feet. His mouth was hot and demanding against hers, tasting of whiskey and something darker, something that made heat pool low in her belly despite everything, despite the grief still clawing at her chest, despite the confusion rioting through her mind. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. Aria, he breathed, her name a question and a prayer all at once. Don't, she whispered, though she made no move to pull away from the circle of his arms. Don't ask me what this means. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. Then we won't define it, Dante said, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw with devastating tenderness. We'll just be 2 people who understand what it means to survive. 2 people who. She kissed him again, cutting off his words because she couldn't bear to hear him articulate what was happening between them, couldn't face the implications of this magnetic pull that defied every rational thought in her head. This man should be her enemy. At minimum he was a criminal, a killer, someone who lived in a world of blood and violence. But when his hands moved down her back, when his lips traveled from her mouth to her jaw to the sensitive spot just below her ear, all she could feel was alive, more alive than she'd felt in 4 long years of existing purely for revenge. We should stop, Dante murmured against her neck, though his hands contradicted his words, one sliding under the hem of her shirt to touch bare skin, the other tangling in her hair. You're vulnerable right now. Emotional. I don't want to take advantage. Shut up, Aria said, pulling his mouth back to hers. For once in 4 years I want to feel something other than rage and grief. I want to feel human again. Don't take that away from me with noble intentions. Something shifted in Dante's expression, restraint giving way to raw desire. Tell me to stop and I will. Anytime, any moment. Just say the word. I won't, Aria said, and she meant it with a certainty that should have terrified her. They moved together with an urgency that spoke of years of denial, of walls finally crumbling, of two people who'd forgotten what it meant to connect with another human being. Dante's hands were everywhere, her hair, her face, sliding under her shirt to trace the muscles of her back, the curve of her waist. His touch was fire and reverence combined, exploring her body like she was something precious and dangerous all at once. Aria's own hands mapped the landscape of his chest through his shirt, feeling the solid muscle beneath, the steady thunder of his heartbeat. When she found the hem and tugged upward, he broke the kiss long enough to pull the shirt over his head and toss it aside. She'd seen his body before during their fight, but this was different. This was permission to look, to touch, to trace the scars that marked him as a survivor of his own violent world. "You're beautiful," Dante said roughly, his hands framing her face as he looked at her with an intensity that made her chest ache. "Fierce and dangerous and absolutely beautiful." "Don't romanticize me," Aria said, though her voice came out breathless as his hands slid down to the buttons of her shirt. "I'm a weapon. You said so yourself." "You're a woman," he corrected, flicking open the first button with practiced ease, then the second, his knuckles brushing against her skin and leaving trails of heat in their wake. "A woman who was forged in fire and came out stronger. But still a woman. Still someone who deserves another button. To be touched. Another. To be wanted." The last button gave way and he pushed the fabric off her shoulders, his eyes darkening as he took in the sight of her. To be worshipped. Before Aria could respond, before she could protest that she didn't deserve worship, that she was broken and damaged and covered in the blood of the men she'd killed, Dante's mouth was on her collarbone, trailing hot kisses down to the swell of her breast. His hands spanned her rib cage, thumbs brushing the underside of her breast through the simple black bra she wore, and Aria heard herself make a sound she didn't recognize, need and want and surrender all mixed together. "Last chance," Dante murmured against her skin, his breath hot and his voice strained with the effort of control. "Tell me to stop and I walk out that door right now. No judgment, no pressure, no." Aria pushed him backward onto the bed, following him down, straddling his hips with her thighs bracketing his waist. She leaned down until her mouth was inches from his, her hair falling around them like a curtain. "If you walk out that door right now, I will never forgive you." The last thread of Dante's control snapped. He rolled them, pinning her beneath him on the silk sheets, his mouth claiming hers with a ferocity that stole her breath. His hands were everywhere, memorizing her body, learning what made her gasp, what made her arch into his touch. When his fingers found the button of her pants, she helped him push them down her legs, kicked them away with a desperation that matched his own. They came together like a collision, all heat and need and years of loneliness finally finding an end. Dante's hands were reverent even as they demanded, his mouth both gentle and consuming as it mapped every inch of her skin. Aria met him touch for touch, kiss for kiss, her hands exploring the planes of his body, the scars that marked him, the places that made him shudder beneath her fingers. When he finally settled between her thighs, when their bodies aligned with devastating precision, he paused to look down at her. "Aria," he said, and there was something vulnerable in his voice, something that spoke of more than just physical need. "Don't," she interrupted, pulling him down for a kiss. "Don't say anything you can't take back. Just be here. With me. Now." So he was. They moved together in the oldest dance humanity knew, two broken people finding solace and connection, in touch, in the reminder that they were alive and whole and still capable of feeling pleasure despite the darkness that surrounded them. Dante was attentive and demanding by turns, learning her body with the same intensity he brought to everything else, pushing her higher and higher until she shattered beneath him with a cry that was equal parts release and grief. He followed moments later, her name on his lips like a prayer, his body shuddering as he buried his face in her neck. They collapsed together, a tangle of limbs and racing hearts and gasping breaths, the silk sheets cool against their overheated skin. For long minutes, neither of them spoke. Dante's weight was solid and grounding on top of her, his breath slowly steadying against her shoulder. Aria's hands traced idle patterns on his back, her mind curiously blank for the first time in 4 years. No rage. No grief. No burning need for vengeance. Just quiet. The steady beat of his heart against her chest and the warmth of his body surrounding hers. Finally, Dante shifted, rolling to his side and pulling her with him so they lay face to face on the bed. His hand came up to brush a strand of hair away from her face, his touch achingly gentle. "That was," he started. "Don't analyze it," Aria said quickly. "Please. I can't think about what this means right now. What we just did. I can't." "Okay," Dante said simply, pressing a kiss to her forehead. No analysis. No definitions. Just sleep. You're exhausted. I can't sleep, she protested even as her eyelids grew heavy. I need to stay alert. Need to. You're safe here, Dante murmured, pulling her closer so her head rested on his chest, his arms wrapped securely around her. I promise you, Aria. No one gets through that door without going through me first. Sleep. I'll keep watch. It was insane to trust him. Insane to let herself be this vulnerable with anyone, let alone a man who was essentially holding her prisoner. But Aria was so tired, her body sated and her mind finally quiet, and Dante's heartbeat was a steady drum beneath her ear. Against every instinct she'd developed over 4 years, she let her eyes close. Marco Rossetti dies, she murmured, already half asleep. Promise me. I promise, Dante said, his hand stroking her hair with soothing repetition. He dies and you get to watch. That's my vow to you. Aria slept. And for the first time in 4 years she didn't dream of fire and blood and the screams of her dying family. She dreamed of nothing at all, just blessed darkness and the warmth of arms that held her like she was something precious. When Aria woke, morning light was streaming through the windows and she was alone in the bed. For a moment panic seized her. Had last night been a mistake? Had Dante used her vulnerability against her? But then she noticed the note on the pillow beside her, written in bold, confident handwriting. Had to take care of some business. Clothes in the closet. Doors unlocked. You're free to move around the estate, though my men have orders to prevent you from leaving. Not imprisonment, protection. Marco has eyes everywhere. Breakfast is waiting downstairs when you're ready. D. Aria sat up, the silk sheets pooling around her waist, and realized she was wearing one of Dante's shirts. She had a vague memory of him dressing her at some point during the night, his touch careful and respectful even in sleep. The gesture did something strange to her chest, made something warm and uncomfortable bloom behind her ribs. She shouldn't trust this. Shouldn't trust him. 4 years of paranoia and survival instinct screamed at her to see this for the manipulation it probably was. But when she showered and dressed in the clothes provided, designer labels, perfectly fitted, more expensive than anything she'd owned in her previous life, and made her way downstairs following the sound of voices, she couldn't quite convince herself that Dante Moretti was playing her. The estate was massive, all vaulted ceilings and priceless art, but it felt lived in rather than like a museum. She found the dining room by instinct, where a full breakfast spread was laid out and Dante sat at the head of the table, surrounded by 3 men who all went silent when she entered. Dante looked up, and something in his expression softened when he saw her. Aria. Good morning. I hope you slept well. The casual domesticity of the greeting in front of his men was jarring. Aria stood frozen in the doorway, suddenly uncertain. But Dante simply stood and pulled out the chair beside him. Gentlemen, this is Aria Santos. She'll be staying with us for the foreseeable future. His tone brooked no argument. Aria, this is Lorenzo, my consigliere. Marco, different Marco, not the one we're going to kill, my head of security. And Paolo, who handles our business operations. The 3 men nodded to her, their faces carefully neutral. They had to know she tried to kill their boss. Had to know she was dangerous. But if Dante had vouched for her, apparently that was enough. I was just briefing them on our Marco Rossetti problem, Dante continued as casually as if he were discussing the weather. Turns out he's been increasingly sloppy lately. Making mistakes. Getting overconfident. He thinks he's won, Lorenzo said, his voice thoughtful. The rumors have been circulating for months that his organization is outpacing ours in the Eastern Territories. He's feeling untouchable. Good, Dante said, and there was something cold in his smile. Overconfident men make fatal errors. Aria found herself sitting, accepting the plate of food Dante passed to her, listening as they discussed strategy with the kind of clinical efficiency that spoke of years working together. They talked about Marco Rossetti's operation like it was a chess game, identifying weak points, potential leverage, ways to isolate him from his protection. He has a private estate about 3 hours north, Marco the security head reported, pulling up photos on a tablet. Heavily fortified. But he only brings his full security detail when he's expecting trouble. Most of the time it's just a skeleton crew. How do we get him to lower his guard? Paolo asked. We don't, Dante said. We make him think he's already won. We leak information that I'm weakened, distracted. Maybe even injured. We let him think his frame job 4 years ago did more damage than it actually did. His eyes cut to Aria. We let him think his assassin succeeded. Understanding dawned on Aria's face. You want to fake your death. Not death. Just incapacitation. Enough that Marco will think he can finally move in and finish what he started. And when he makes his move. We're waiting, Aria finished. With everything we need to end him permanently. Dante smiled, and it was the smile of a predator. Exactly. Over the next 3 weeks they put the plan into motion. Dante's organization began strategic retreats from certain territories, making it look like weakness. Rumors were carefully planted about internal dissension, about Dante being distracted by a woman, about an injury from a recent attempt on his life that had left him vulnerable. Every piece of information was calibrated to paint exactly the picture they wanted Marco Rossetti to see. And during those 3 weeks, something shifted between Aria and Dante. It started small, coffee together in the morning while discussing strategy, Dante's hand finding hers under the table during meetings, his habit of checking on her before bed no matter how late his business kept him. But it grew into something neither of them could quite name or deny. Aria trained with Dante's security team, impressed them with skills they'd never seen outside of special forces. She proved herself not as a prisoner but as an asset, someone whose expertise could benefit the organization. Dante's men began to respect her, then to trust her, until she was seamlessly integrated into the operation in a way that should have taken years. But it was the private moments that undid her. Dante in his study late at night, showing her files on Marco Rossetti, explaining the breadth of the man's crimes with a cold fury that matched her own. Dante teaching her to shoot with his preferred weapons, standing behind her at the range with his hands guiding hers, his voice low and steady in her ear. Dante finding her on the terrace after a nightmare, pulling her into his arms without a word, just holding her until the shaking stopped. "I'm falling for you," Aria admitted one night, the words torn from her before she could stop them. They were in his study, the rest of the estate asleep, reviewing the latest intelligence on Marco's movements. "And I don't know how to deal with that." Dante looked up from the file he was reading, his dark eyes finding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You think you're the only one?" He set the file aside and moved around the desk, pulling her to her feet. "Aria, I've spent 20 years building an empire, and I've never let anyone close enough to matter. Never let anyone in. And then you broke into my hotel room with a knife and—" He stopped, seeming to search for words. "And everything changed." "This is insane," Aria whispered, though she didn't pull away when his arms wrapped around her. "We barely know each other. A month ago I wanted you dead." "I know." Dante's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "But I also know that when I think about the future, you're in it. When I make plans, I'm calculating how to keep you safe. When I wake up, the first thing I want is to see your face." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "I'm in love with you, Aria Santos. Completely. Irrevocably. And probably very stupidly." "Definitely stupidly," Aria said, but her voice was thick with emotion and her hands were fisted in his shirt, holding him close rather than pushing him away. "I'm damaged. Broken. I've spent 4 years becoming a killer. That doesn't just go away." "I don't want it to go away," Dante said fiercely. "I want you exactly as you are. Fierce and dangerous and brilliant. My equal. My—" He paused and something vulnerable flickered across his face. "My everything." Aria kissed him then, pouring every complicated emotion she didn't have words for into the press of her lips against his. Dante responded with matching intensity, lifting her onto the desk, scattering files and photographs as he settled between her thighs. They made love there in his study, surrounded by the evidence of the war they were planning, and it felt like sealing a pact, like binding themselves together in ways that went far deeper than physical pleasure. Afterwards, wrapped in Dante's arms with her head on his chest, Aria finally let herself believe it might be real. That this man who should have been her enemy had somehow become the person she trusted most in the world. That the future might hold something other than vengeance and pain. "When this is over," Dante murmured into her hair, "when Marco Rossetti is dead and you finally have your justice, what do you want?" Aria was quiet for a long moment, thinking. 4 years ago, she would have said she wanted oblivion. Death after revenge. An end to the pain. But now, "I want a life," she said softly. "A real one. With choices that aren't dictated by trauma. With mornings that don't start with rage. With—" She stopped, afraid to say it. "With me." Dante finished, and there was hope in his voice, vulnerable and raw. "Yes," Aria admitted, tilting her head up to look at him. "With you. If you'll have me." "Bella," Dante said, and his smile was brilliant enough to light the darkness. "I've been yours since the moment you cut my jaw. You just didn't know it yet." 2 days later, their carefully laid trap finally sprung. Marco Rossetti made his move. The call came at 2 in the morning. Dante was already awake, standing at the window of his bedroom where Aria slept in his bed, when his phone buzzed. He answered it immediately, his voice low so as not to wake her. "Talk to me," he said. He took the bait. Lorenzo's voice came through. "Marco's mobilizing. 12 men heading toward the safe house where we've been leaking your location. He thinks you're vulnerable, recovering from the assassination attempt. He's coming to finish it himself." Dante smiled, cold and predatory. "Perfect. Everything's in place. Our teams are positioned. We'll take out his men on approach." "But boss," Lorenzo hesitated. "He's bringing heavy firepower. This is going to get messy." "Let it get messy," Dante said. "I want him to think he's winning right up until the moment we close the trap." He ended the call and turned to find Aria sitting up in bed, the sheets pulled around her waist, her eyes sharp and alert despite having been asleep moments before. 4 years of survival instinct didn't fade quickly. "It's happening?" she asked. "Tonight. Marco's making his move." Aria was out of bed instantly, reaching for the tactical gear they'd prepared weeks ago. "Then we end this. Tonight." Dante caught her wrist, pulling her back to him. For a moment, he just looked at her, memorizing her face in the dim light, the fierce determination in her eyes, the set of her jaw, the way her body was already primed for violence. His brilliant, deadly, beautiful woman. "If something goes wrong," he started. "It won't," Aria interrupted firmly. "But if it does," Dante continued, "if I don't make it out of this." "Don't?" She pressed her fingers to his lips. "Don't you dare start talking like that. We're both walking out of this alive, Dante. We have plans. A future. You don't get to take that away from me when I've just started believing it's possible." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, pouring everything he couldn't say into the press of his mouth against hers. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "Stay close to me," he murmured. "Trust Lorenzo and the team but stay within my sight." "I can't," his voice roughened. "I can't lose you, Aria. Not now. Not when I've finally found you." "You won't lose me," she promised, though both of them knew it was a promise neither of them could truly make in the world they inhabited. "Now let's go kill the man who murdered my family." They moved through the estate with military precision, joining Lorenzo and the assembled team. Dante had called in his most trusted men, 20 skilled operators, all loyal, all lethal. The plan was simple. Let Marco and his men breach the safe house where Dante was supposedly vulnerable, then close the trap from all sides. Quick, clean, overwhelming force. But as they drove through the dark toward their destination, something gnawed at Dante's instincts. The operation felt too smooth. Marco Rossetti was paranoid and clever. Taking such a straightforward approach didn't match his pattern. "Lorenzo," Dante said into the comms. "Double-check our surveillance. Something feels off." "Already on it, boss." All feeds show. Lorenzo's voice cut off abruptly. Then more urgently, "Shit. Boss, it's a feint. Marco's not at the safe house. He's..." The comm went dead. Dante's blood ran cold. "Lorenzo?" Lorenzo respond. Static. Beside him, Aria had gone rigid, her combat instincts screaming the same warning his were. "It's a trap," she said. "He knew we were expecting him. He's turned it around." "Location," Dante barked to his driver. "Where would he?" The realization hit him like a physical blow. "The estate. He's going for the estate. He wants to take everything." They whipped the car around, tires screaming, racing back toward Dante's home. But even as they drove, Dante knew they were too late. Marco Rossetti had outplayed them. While they'd been focused on the safe house, Marco had sent a separate team to hit Dante's actual base of operations. To steal his files, kill his remaining men, cripple his empire at its heart. To take Dante himself. They arrived to chaos. Fires burning in the western wing. Bodies of Dante's men scattered across the grounds. The sound of gunfire echoing from inside the mansion. Dante moved through it all with deadly efficiency, Aria at his side, both of them cutting through Marco's forces like avenging angels. But they were outnumbered and Marco's men were professionals. A flashbang grenade exploded near Dante, stunning him long enough for 3 men to tackle him. He fought like a demon, taking 2 of them down, but the third got a solid hit with a baton to his ribs, then his head. His vision swam. He heard Aria screaming his name, heard gunfire, and then nothing. Dante woke to agony. Every nerve in his body was on fire, his muscles screaming from stress positions, his ribs definitely cracked if not broken. He tried to move and realized he was suspended, his arms chained above his head, spread eagle, his feet barely touching the ground. Blood dripped from various cuts on his torso, pooling on the concrete floor beneath him. He was in a warehouse. The space was vast and empty except for the single light swinging above him and the shadows that lurked beyond its reach. Slowly his memory returned. The ambush. The fight. Being overwhelmed. Aria. Panic cut through the pain. Where was Aria? Had Marco taken her too? Killed her? The thought sent horror through him worse than any physical torture could manage. Ah, you're awake. The voice came from the shadows, smooth and satisfied. Marco Rossetti stepped into the light, and Dante's vision focused enough to see him clearly, middle-aged, well-dressed, with the kind of face that looked harmless until you saw the cruelty in his eyes. Dante Moretti. I've waited years for this moment. Where is she? Dante rasped, his voice rough from screaming he didn't remember. What did you do with her? The girl? Your little assassin? Marco laughed. She got away. Killed 6 of my men doing it. Impressive. I can see why you kept her. He moved closer, pulling out a knife that gleamed in the harsh light. But she'll be back. They always come back for the people they love. And when she does, I'll be ready. I'll kill you in front of her, slow and painful. Then I'll kill her too. But first. The knife bit into Dante's shoulder, a calculated cut designed for maximum pain without hitting anything vital. Dante gritted his teeth, refusing to give Marco the satisfaction of hearing him scream. First, I'm going to enjoy this, Marco continued, the knife moving lower, tracing patterns of agony across Dante's chest. You've been a thorn in my side for 15 years. Always one step ahead, always just out of reach. But now I have you exactly where I want you. Time became meaningless. Marco worked with the practiced efficiency of someone who enjoyed causing pain, alternating between cuts and questions, between torture and casual conversation. He wanted information about Dante's operation, about his financial holdings, about where his loyalties lay. Dante gave him nothing except blood and silence. You're stronger than I expected, Marco admitted after what might have been hours. Most men break faster. But everyone breaks eventually, Dante. Everyone. Not today, Dante managed, though every word sent pain lancing through his cracked ribs. Not for you. Marco raised the knife again. And Aria's voice cut through the warehouse like a blade of pure fury. Step away from him. Dante's head jerked up. There she was, standing in a doorway he hadn't noticed, backlit by the setting sun outside. She was covered in blood, not her own, he realized, and she held 2 guns, one pointed directly at Marco, the other sweeping the space for additional threats. The assassin returns, Marco said, but there was something nervous in his voice now. Come to watch your lover die? Come to watch you die, Aria corrected coldly. How many men do you have in here, Marco? 10. However many it is, it won't be enough. As if in answer, shadows moved in the warehouse. Marco's men stepping out, weapons raised. Dante counted 9. 9 professional killers against 1 woman, no matter how skilled. But Aria just smiled, and it was the coldest, most terrifying expression Dante had ever seen. I spent 4 years preparing to kill 1 man. Did you really think I'd only learn how to kill 1 at a time? What happened next would haunt Dante's dreams for years, but not with horror, with awe. Aria moved like death personified. She dropped the first 2 men before they'd fully processed she was moving, her shots precise and lethal. She used their bodies as shields, ducking and weaving through the warehouse with inhuman grace. Each shot she fired found its mark. Each movement was economical, efficient, beautiful in its deadly precision. Marco's men fell one by one. Some managed to get shots off, but Aria was always somewhere else, moving through the space like water, impossible to pin down. In less than 2 minutes, 8 men lay dead or dying on the warehouse floor. Only Marco remained, backing toward Dante with his knife raised. Stay back, he shouted, pressing the blade to Dante's throat. Stay back or I open his throat right now. Aria stopped, her gun still raised, her eyes cold and calculating. You're going to die, Marco. The only question is how much pain you experience first. I'll kill him. Marco's hand was shaking, whether from fear or adrenaline Dante couldn't tell. I swear I'll. The gunshot exploded through the warehouse. But it didn't come from Aria. It came from behind, from where Marco's last man, wounded but not dead, had raised his weapon for one final shot at the woman who'd killed his entire team. Time slowed. Dante saw the trajectory, saw where the bullet was headed, directly at Aria's heart. Without thinking, operating purely on instinct and love and desperate need, he threw his full weight forward despite the chains, swinging his body directly into the bullet's path. The impact slammed into his back just left of his spine. Pain exploded through him, white-hot and all-consuming. He heard Aria scream his name. Heard Marco curse. And then his chains gave way, whether broken by his momentum or released by Marco in shock, Dante didn't know, and he collapsed to the concrete floor in a heap. Through vision that was rapidly dimming, Dante saw Aria's final move. She drew her knife, the same blade she tried to kill him with that first night, and hurled it with perfect precision across the warehouse. It caught Marco Rossetti directly through his right eye, embedding so deep the point emerged from the back of his skull. Marco dropped instantly, dead before his body hit the ground. Then Aria was beside Dante, her hands on his face, his chest, frantically checking the wound. "No, no, no," she was chanting, and he realized she was crying, tears streaming down her face and mixing with the blood that covered them both. "Dante, stay with me. Stay with me. You don't get to die. You promised me a future. You promised." "Aria," he managed, tasting copper. "It's okay. You're safe. That's all that matters." "It's not okay," she screamed, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. Lorenzo, I need medical now. The warehouse on 5th, he's been shot, her voice broke. "He's bleeding out. Please hurry." Dante reached up with a hand that felt impossibly heavy, touching her face. "Love you," he whispered. "My fierce, beautiful." "Don't," Aria sobbed. "Don't you dare say goodbye. You're going to live. You're going to marry me and give me that future you promised. You're going to." But darkness was pulling at Dante's consciousness, dragging him down into depths he wasn't sure he'd return from. The last thing he saw before it claimed him completely was Aria's face above his, twisted in anguish, her tears falling like rain. Then nothing. 2 months later, Aria stood in Dante's study, closing a deal with the Valentino family that would expand their eastern territories by 30%. She'd been running Dante's empire for 63 days, making decisions with a combination of his strategic mind and her ruthless efficiency. His men had fallen in line immediately, partly from respect, partly from fear, partly because Lorenzo had made it clear she spoke with Dante's full authority. Not that Dante could authorize anything. He'd been in a coma since the warehouse, hovering in that liminal space between life and death while Aria kept his empire functioning and lived in a hell of not knowing if he'd ever wake up. She'd killed Marco Rossetti. She'd gotten her vengeance. But it meant nothing when the man she loved was lying in a hospital bed, hooked to machines that breathed for him. "Madame Moretti," one of the Valentino representatives said, and Aria still wasn't used to the title Dante's organization had started using for her. "The terms are acceptable. We'll begin the transfer of territories next week." "Good," Aria said, forcing her voice into something businesslike despite the exhaustion pulling at her. "Lorenzo will handle the details. Now if you'll excuse me, I have another meeting." The door burst open. Maria, one of the household staff, stood there with tears streaming down her face and the brightest smile Aria had ever seen. "Madam," Maria gasped. "Madam, your husband, he's awake." Aria's world tilted. The contracts on the desk, the Valentino family, the empire she'd been desperately holding together, all of it ceased to exist. She was moving before she'd consciously decided to, running through the mansion's halls, taking stairs 2 at a time, racing toward the private medical suite they'd set up in the East Wing. The doctor was just stepping out when she arrived, and his smile confirmed what Maria had said. "He's awake. Weak but lucid. He's been asking for you." Aria's hand trembled on the door handle. For 2 months, she'd lived in fear of this moment going differently, of being called to his bedside to say goodbye, of watching him slip away, of being left alone again in a world that had just started to feel like it might offer something more than pain. She pushed open the door. Dante was sitting up, barely, supported by pillows, looking impossibly frail and perfect all at once. He'd lost weight, his face gaunt and shadowed. But his eyes were open, alert, focused on her with an intensity that stole her breath. "Aria," he said, and his voice was rough from disuse but still the voice that had murmured love into her hair and promised her a future. "They said you've been running everything. That you—" He stopped, emotion flickering across his face. "Come here. Please." Aria crossed the room on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. When she reached his bedside, she collapsed into the chair beside him, her hands reaching for his, threading their fingers together like she'd dreamed of doing for 63 endless days. "You're awake," she whispered, and then she was crying, great heaving sobs that she couldn't control. "You're awake and you're alive and I thought. Shoo," Dante murmured, using what little strength he had to pull her closer. to press her head against his chest where his heart beat steady and strong beneath her ear. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. You were gone for 2 months, Aria said through her tears. 2 months of not knowing if you'd wake up, if I'd lost you, if... She pulled back to look at him, her eyes fierce. Don't you ever do that again. Don't you ever take a bullet for me. I can't lose you, Dante. I won't survive it. You would, Dante said gently, his thumb brushing away her tears. You're the strongest person I know. You've proven that by keeping my empire running, by holding everything together while I was... He paused, his expression growing serious. But I don't plan on making you test that strength. I'm not going anywhere. They sat in silence for a long moment, just holding each other, relearning the reality of touch, of presence, of having survived something that should have destroyed them both. Finally, Dante shifted slightly, wincing at the movement but determined. There's something I need to do. Something I should have done before everything went to hell. Dante, you need to rest. Whatever it is can. It can't wait, he interrupted firmly. He gestured to the drawer in the bedside table. Open it. Please. Confused, Aria pulled open the drawer. Inside was a small velvet box, the same box she'd seen him acquire at the auction that first night, a lifetime ago. Her breath caught in her throat. Dante. I bought this before you tried to kill me, he said, his voice rough with emotion. The night we met after our fight when you were tied up in my jet. I saw that ring and I thought of you, fierce and dark and beautiful. I knew even then that you were going to change my life. I just didn't know how completely. He took the box from her shaking hands and opened it. The black diamond gleamed in the afternoon light streaming through the windows, surrounded by its constellation of smaller stones. It was the most beautiful thing Aria had ever seen. With visible effort, Dante shifted, trying to kneel beside the bed. Aria immediately moved to help him, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. You don't have to, she started, but he shook his head. I need to do this right, he insisted. And then, with Aria supporting him, Dante Moretti knelt on the floor beside his hospital bed, the velvet box open in his hands, and looked up at the woman who'd tried to kill him and instead had saved his soul. Aria Santos, he began, and his voice was stronger now, filled with certainty despite his physical weakness. You broke into my life with a knife and vengeance in your heart. You were supposed to be my death, but instead you became my salvation. You're my equal in every way, fierce and brilliant and dangerous and kind. You held my empire together when I couldn't. You've proven yourself to be not just my partner but my perfect match in every sense of the word. Tears were streaming down Aria's face again, but she was smiling through them, her heart so full she thought she might shatter from the intensity of it. I came back from death for you, Dante continued, his eyes never leaving hers. I fought through darkness and pain and the pull of oblivion because somewhere in my subconscious, I knew you were waiting. I knew we had a future to build. And I am not wasting another moment of the life you gave back to me. He pulled the ring from the box, holding it up to catch the light. Marry me, Aria. Be my wife, my partner, my everything. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that you're the best thing that ever happened to me. Let me give you the future we both deserve. One built on choice and love and hope instead of pain and vengeance. Yes, Aria said, the word bursting from her before he'd even finished. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Dante slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit as if it had been made for her all along. Then Aria was pulling him up, helping him back onto the bed, and kissing him with all the love and relief and desperate joy that had been building in her chest for 2 months of hell. They broke apart, foreheads pressed together, breathing hard, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. I love you, Aria said, the words coming easier now, no longer weighed down by fear and doubt. I love you so much it terrifies me. You're everything I never knew I needed, everything I thought I'd lost the right to have. You have the right to everything, Dante said fiercely, his hands cupping her face like she was something infinitely precious. Happiness, safety, love, a future. You've earned it 1,000 times over. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that again. We're going to build something beautiful, Aria said, looking down at the ring on her finger, dark and fierce and perfect, just like the love it represented. Something that honors the people we lost, the pain we survived, the strength we found. Together, Dante agreed, pulling her close, holding her like he'd never let go. We'll build it together. An empire of love and blood and salvation. A future neither of us could have imagined when you first came through my window ready to kill me. Aria laughed, the sound light and free in a way it hadn't been in 4 years. Best assassination attempt I ever made. Best night of my life, Dante countered, his smile brilliant. Even with the knife wound. They fell into each other again, two people who'd been forged in fire and blood and loss, who'd found each other across an impossible divide, who'd chosen love when everything in their world suggested only violence and pain. Marco Rossetti was dead. Aria's family had justice. Dante's empire stood stronger than ever. And most importantly, they had survived, not just physically but emotionally, their battered hearts somehow finding in each other exactly what they needed to heal. Outside the window, the sun set over the estate, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new battles to fight. But tonight, in this quiet moment, Dante and Aria allowed themselves something they'd both thought was lost forever: hope. And in a world built on darkness, hope was its own kind of revolution. Want more dark romance? If this story captured your heart and left you craving more intense, emotional romance with complex characters and high-stakes drama, subscribe to our newsletter for exclusive early access to new dark romance stories, free bonus chapters and extended epilogues, character artwork and playlists to bring stories to life, recommendations for similar books and authors, behind-the-scenes content about character development and plot creation. Click below button to subscribe, and never miss a passionate, dangerous love story again. Your next obsession is just one click away. Join thousands of readers who crave romance that's as dark as it is beautiful. Did Dante and Aria's story move you? Share it with fellow romance readers who appreciate complex characters, redemption arcs, and love that conquers even the darkest circumstances.